Phineas, how's it going today? Aye, fine. Ye? Oh, I'm doing well. Hey, say, does this, what's the contract here? Is CIF Port St. Potluck? Is that right? Nay, 'tis DDP to Potluck City. Oh, goodness, who negotiated that? Ye did. Oh, aye. Hi, this is John Paulus. You're listening to Life's Potluck Buffet, and that little vignette from the port, I hope, demonstrated something about workplace jargon. Today's episode is about Worksheet 5, which is a worksheet connected to the card, Translation is Your Enemy. So let me start by giving you the background on the worksheet. When we rely on translation to communicate with people who speak a language we don't know, we understand how much important stuff is lost in the process. And you remember that from card number 5, Translation is Your Enemy. The same is true for languages of our work lives. As we engage in any field of work, we become fluent in the language of its culture, the jargon that means nothing or even something different to people in other fields of work. Seek to understand and become fluent in the languages of work cultures with which you engage. So on this worksheet, there are 2 boxes. There's one on the left and one on the right. The idea is that you fill in the box on the left and pass it to someone else to fill in the box on the right. And in the box, write some words or terms that you use in your job that people outside your job would not understand. And then when you hand it to the other person, that person fills out terms that they use in their job that people outside their jobs wouldn't understand. And then when you're done with that, you now teach each other what the words or terms mean. And so I'll play around a little bit here, talk about some terms related to Life's Potluck Buffet YouTube, and some of the videos on the playlist for card number 5, Translation is Your Enemy. The first video, which I adore, is about interpreters. And it talks about the nitty-gritty of interpretation. And it really goes into terminology that is important to know, describing types of interpretation. This is where you have 2 diplomats, for example. One in the video, one is a Spanish speaker, the other one's an English speaker, and the 2 interpreters are there at the table with them. The interpreter who is narrating the video and who's the host of the video talks about 2 terms in French that I think are really nice terms. One of them is chouchoutage. Chouchoutage, that's onomatopoetic, I suppose. Chouchoutage, which is the French word for whispering. And it's when you're next to a person in a private setting in a room and interpreting right next to them in a whisper, and so that they can understand in real time what the person they're meeting with is saying. So I like that term, chouchoutage. I'm going to put it in the box here. Chouchoutage. Okay. Great. The next video on the playlist has a video from This Old House, which I have always loved watching This Old House from the very first episode to present day episodes. I'll watch any episode of This Old House. I just love it. You know, I love crafts. I love home repairs. I love all of this. In fact, I used This Old House to do the window stools in the house here. And that's why I wanted to talk about window stool, because I often find myself getting hung up on this one, because when I try to tell people that I did all the window stools in the house, they say, I don't see any window stools. There are no stools near these windows, right? Because when you say window stool, it sounds like you're talking about a stool. But it's just me being very specific, as is my want. And, it's a blessing and a curse. So the window stool, and you'll learn if you watch that This Old House video, Tom Silva, who's a general contractor who's been on This Old House for many, many, many years, is showing the homeowner how to install window trim on the interior. And in the very beginning of the video, he explains on the outside of a window, the little ledgy thing that goes underneath the window is called a window sill. But on the inside of the window, it's called a window stool. And this is a really good example of how a term that means something to other listeners, that, the word stool normally in English means like a chair or a seat type thing. That gives you a good example of something that is used differently in common parlance from very specific general contractor jargon. Then the next video on the playlist has Incoterms for beginners. And what are Incoterms? Well, Incoterms are trade delivery terms from the International Chamber of Commerce that are used in contracts involving the movement of goods from a seller to a buyer. And our little vignette at the beginning of this episode with Phineas, who seems to have an unplaceable accent. I'm not sure what accent that was. If you know, let me know. So, or if you have that accent, if you share Phineas's accent, let me know where you're from. Phineas and I were using Incoterms to talk about some shipping that I was doing there. And I was asking, remember I said, oh, is this CIF Port St. Potluck? That's CIF stands for Cost Insurance Freight, meaning that I, as the seller, was going to cover everything basically from when it leaves my factory to the point at which the ship pulls into Port St. Potluck, including the insurance. So was CIF, right? And the Incoterm that Phineas said was the actual terms of the contract was DDP, which is something very different from CIF, because that means that I was on the hook to pay for everything up until it arrives basically at the buyer's warehouse. Well, not basically, actually. And DDP stands for Delivery Duty Paid. So that's why I was a little bit bummed about that situation, knowing that I was on the hook for all of those extra costs that I didn't realize. The next video on the playlist for Translation is Your Enemy is about something called the Dutch angle. And you say, well, Dutch angle, that could be anything and anywhere. The Dutch angle is a term in the production of films and television, but it's really an important film term for an angle that's slightly askew. And this Dutch angle video explains the origins of the Dutch angle. Spoiler alert, is actually a Deutsch angle. It's not from the Netherlands, but a German practice, because German expressionist artists who were making films started by having the set tilted. But then other clever filmmakers said, oh, wait a second, instead of tilting the set, why don't we just tilt the camera? So, that's how things evolve. So the camera's tilted, and this represents, at least to people who are film experts, they talk about it as being in scenes. You'll notice it's used a lot in film noir to give a kind of feeling of kind of things being out of sorts and somewhat, unsettled, and all of the things. There's danger, or there may be danger. Anyway, the Dutch angle is a very good angle to use for situations that involve as the video explains, the kind of turmoil, whether it's emotional turmoil or actual turmoil, that the German expressionist painters were trying to represent in their paintings. So that's a really cool thing to learn about. But it's called a Dutch angle. It's different from Dutch oven. As it turns out, someone asked me the other day, is Dutch oven actually Deutsch oven as well, like Dutch angle? I said, no, it's actually, at least apparently this is the story, that it's because of English pots that were designed based on the model of pots in the Netherlands. So it actually is a Dutch oven, not a Deutsch oven. So just to clear that up for anybody out there wondering, that's my understanding of that situation. So it looks like that's all the time we have for today. Join me tomorrow for the continuation of this episode, part 2, where I'll fill out the right side of the worksheet number 5 with special terms from the world of Life's Potluck Buffet. If you enjoyed this episode, part 1, please give it a like. Subscribe if you already haven't, and I'll see you tomorrow on Life's Potluck Buffet. Oh, there's the potluck star. Oh, I guess it's heading out to break some ice. Bye.